thanks everybody for coming. Mr. Boettcher, myself, Miss Berlin, Megan's here. We're going to be talking about it. So this was I wouldn't say pulled together at the last minute, but it was more like a, hey, Miss Berlin, Mr. Boettcher, you want to talk on Sunday, like our, as we normally do. And they were like, yeah, let's do it. And I was like, man, it'd be nice to get Megan on. And Amanda said, oh, I'll ask her. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. Yeah. So Megan has been on, it's been a few years,
4 or
unfortunately.
5, I think. Pre-COVID.
Yeah, about 5.
It was pre-COVID.
Yes, it was.
Because it was pre-mental health hackers, because that's how you and me met, you and I met, Amanda. So
right.
I think it was that year, probably 2019, earlier in that year.
Yep. So yeah, that was, what helped create that. So Megan, I have a couple things before we go. We have a disclaimer. The views, information, and opinions expressed on this program are solely the views of the individuals involved and by no means represent absolute facts. Opinions expressed by the hosts and guests can change at any time and do not represent the views of past, present, or future employers. So just wanted to say that because I'm going to add this, I'm not going to try to edit as much as I can from the podcast. So
this is not legal advice, not financial advice. Do your own due diligence.
That's right. Go see a mental doctor first. We're not mental health professionals or medical personnel. So, but yeah. So, Megan and her co-authors have come out with a book from Pact Publishing. It is called Practical Threat Detection Engineering. Apparently, it's doing fairly well in the initial sales, which is awesome to hear. It's good to have you back, Megan, after so many years. It's been far too long, and we should have had you on a lot sooner than that. But maybe you could tell us a little bit about yourself for those folks who haven't listened to your podcast episode, and maybe catch us up on where you've been so far in your career.
Yeah, so lots of things. It's been kind of a long 4 years. So back when I was originally on the show, I think I was working as a SOC analyst. And so basic SOC analyst working for an MSSP, doing a little bit of incident response. After I left that kind of area, I ended up at IBM working in threat intel. So I was there for 3 years, I think 2 to 3 years. And then most recently last year, I moved over to working in security engineering. And so focused on detection engineering and basically more on a product team so than services. So actually building detections for products, security products. And that kind of led me, honestly, it was a random invite or message online from a Packet product manager who said they needed a book on detection engineering, and was I interested? And a couple of my coworkers were also interested, so we put it together, and that's kind of drawn me into detection engineering.
Nice.
My other kind of area that you might see a lot of my work online in is last year I joined SANS as a co-author of Forensics 509, Enterprise Cloud Forensics and Incident Response. And so for SANS, I published a lot of research on that front. So kind of cloud defer and detection engineering have been my focus the last couple of years.
Very nice. Okay. I'm just looking up the SANS courses so people can go and check those out if they want to hit that up. All right. And so so you have 2 master's degrees, one in digital forensics and the other in information security engineering. And you're also, when you're not fighting cybercrime, an active competitor in Muay Thai and kickboxing, which I follow you on Facebook. So I see these posts where you're just kicking people's asses. And I was like, wow, that's amazing.
Trying to.
Yeah. So, that's something definitely interesting.
She's my personal security. Like anytime
we are
there,
I'm ready. I'm ready to go. I'm just hoping Amanda pisses someone off. Like,
constantly.
I need these body dudes.
Constantly.
Yeah.
Not enough, apparently, because you've never gotten
no fights yet on Amanda's behalf.
Yeah, we're going to Chicago soon, so
yeah.
I heard that y'all are going to Blue Team Con, so
yes.
Yeah, nice. Okay.
Looking forward to it. It's my new favorite, honestly. If anyone's in the Chicago area or has the ability to go to Chicago at the end of August, come out.
So
they're doing great things.
Very nice. Okay.
Yep.
All right. So the book came out. It's on Pack Publishing. I'll put a link up in notes to it. This is so. I will tell you, I'm I don't want to say ignorant about this, but we've talked about this at length. Miss Berlin, Mr. Boettcher, and myself talked at length about things like Windows codes and all this stuff. But and we've had interviews recently with Blue Mira, who's a sponsor of the show here. Talking about threat detections and their methodologies, and it seems like a lot of threat detection there's some secret sauce behind it. But this book, I hope, is helping to I don't want to say demystify, but it's helping people to set up labs. The idea is to help understand. You're going to be using Elastic Stack, I believe. I looked through some of the doc. I actually have the book as part of my Packed subscription. That I picked up as, because I'm learning Rust at the same time. So I was like, oh, it's in the same neighborhood. I'll just go get it. And so I was reading through some of that, and I have some questions here and some screenshots in our show notes on things. How long did it take you to write the book with your two authors? How do you coordinate that? I know Miss Berlin had a co-author with her Defensive Security Handbook. And it took about 1.5 years, 2 years to get it out. How long did this take in writing?
Thank God not that long. I probably would have quit before. So I think they reached out to me in like September, and we probably started authoring content around October. And then we probably finished content late May, early June, and then it was just on the publisher to do all the final touches. So I'd say like 6 to 9 months, somewhere around there. We did have 3 authors, which was nice. That's a lot of division of labor. So kind of probably why Amanda's took a little bit longer. 2 people, it's less to divide up. But it was a group chat. One of my co-authors shared the link. He's like, the product of a group chat with 3 nerds, because that's really what it was. We were in a Google chat sharing links and thoughts and things back and forth and checking over each other's stuff. But it was a really great team to work with because we kind of just divided it up. We knew who was working on what, and we ran with it. So they had us on a decently strict timeline. Honestly, it was like their goal timeline was a chapter every 2 weeks, and there's 12 chapters. Obviously that is not, it took us 3 to 4 weeks probably per chapter. And then there's like the copy editing rounds that we had technical reviewers who give feedback that we have to adjust for. But overall 6 to 9 months, I'd say, for actual writing of content.
Okay. All right. Very nice. So I don't want to hog all the questions, and I'm not a defensive person with logging and threat detection. That's not my bag. We have 2 more qualified people to do that. So I'll start off with, because I've looked through the first 5 or 6 chapters here, including the lab setup and stuff. You mentioned 3 different threat model, or not threat models, but you mentioned 3 different ways of classifying the detections, and one of them was called the pyramid of pain, and then, which I'd never heard of. You first started off by talking about the unified kill chain, which was created by Lockheed Martin way back in the day, and had been expanded upon. It's the unified kill chain, so it's kind of the modified version. And then you had the attack matrix from MITRE. Mm-hmm. Of these 3 models, which one do you find you use more, and why? And I can ask the other folks this question too. But Megan, from your point of view, do you use all 3 equally, or is there one you find you use more often?
I would say equally. I think they all have their use cases, and so that kind of leads to the variance. For me, I'd say I'd use attack the most. That's what's most integrated into tools. The expansiveness of the use cases I can use it for, I'd say use, but they're very different purposes, because attack is classifying individual behaviors, techniques, tactics, and it is broken into the tactics of different phases, but it's mostly on the individual actions. Kill chain is more chaining together the pathway an attacker takes, so they have to perform their reconnaissance, and then they have to get into the environment. Once they're in, they want to perform some objectives. They want to gain persistence, lateral movement. So the chain is more of a sequence of events, whereas attack is kind of individual techniques used to perform those events. Then pyramid of pain is kind of a completely separate concept that I'd say I use broadly, but like from a subconscious method. So I'm not constantly referring to a picture of the pyramid of pain, but what that teaches is that there's some indicators, some things that you can look for from an attacker that are more easily changed by an attacker. So for example, hashes are towards the bottom of the pyramid of pain. As an attacker, if my hash is now being detected by security vendors, all I have to do is add a space character to the end of the file. Now it's got a new hash because the content's different. It does the same thing. Whatever I added is meaningless. It doesn't change it, but the hash changes. So that's not a good thing to detect on, because as an attacker, when I know it's detected, I can change it easily. At the top of the pyramid is the TTPs, and that's where we're talking about like attack style behaviors. That's saying I'm going to detect the behavior. So not the hash of this malicious file is XYZ, but if you run this malicious file, it is going to have a parent process of Word with a child process of a command shell, which is weird. Why are you spinning up command shells via Word? So, and that's not something that the attacker can change without changing the functionality of the payload or of their actions themselves. So pyramid of pain, I don't really refer to as a concept specifically, but what it teaches I'm using day to day. I'm saying, okay, well, I could detect this by detecting the file name, but the attacker could change that. Instead, I could detect it based on the process tree. The attacker is going to have more challenges changing how their malware works. So conceptually, pyramid of pain is a very big one.
Okay. Very nice.
I definitely like to hear what Amanda and Boettcher think, though, on the different frameworks and how much they actually leverage them in their day-to-day.
I think customers, at least in the space that we are like targeting at Blumera, ask for MITRE more, right? They know what MITRE is. They, have at least seen the attack framework. They may, I don't think any of them know about the pyramid of pain, but you're like 100% correct when you're like crafting detections. It also, it's not just the pyramid of pain. Well, I guess it kind of speaks to this too, but the hashes and the IPs and domains, all of those are really, really noisy, right? Like it's much more difficult to create a very, very good detection the lower you are on that pyramid. Where as you get to the top, you're like, oh, there's just this very, very specific action, that you can definitely hone in on. But that's just like one tiny thing out of all of the, hundreds and hundreds of things that you could possibly detect on. They all definitely have their different uses. So I don't know if you could really just focus on one. I don't know.
Kill chain, I think, is less widely discussed now. Like MITRE kind of
More of
entered
a
the scene.
government thing, right?
Yeah, I mean, because it came from a defense contractor to begin with. I think it's good to understand the reason we introduce this is this concept of like when you're detecting things, you need to know how an attacker works, and an attacker has to follow certain steps. They can't deploy ransomware without first entering the environment, which requires an initial access phase. So like you can identify these certain points that attackers have to hit, and that's kind of the value in detection engineering in terms of like sometimes we can't just detect a technique, or maybe we can, but sometimes there's more value in understanding what happens in a chain. So like understanding like running who am I, which is an attack tactic. It's like discovery of accounts. That alone, you can't detect on that because sysadmins may run who am I or a net stat or something like that. But when you think about the chain and like, hey, well, who am I is this reconnaissance phase. So what if we see a who am I followed by some sort of privilege escalation tactic? Now it's starting to look like an attack chain. So that's the value, I think, of the chain is like understanding the structure, the process that an attacker has to follow.
Right. Mr. Boettcher, do you find yourself using the attack matrix more than Pyramid of Pain or the other ones?
Well, the attack matrix is more well known. So when you're talking to somebody about it, they'll better understand. When you say Pyramid of Pain, I don't think many people have heard about that, right?
Yeah, I haven't
Although
either.
I find it more useful, right? When I need to focus on something, if I have to set up an environment quickly, I'm going to start with the top of the pyramid, right? The hash detections, I don't really do. In most of the environments I've had set up a sim for, we've had EDR on the machines. So the hashing, some of the things that normally you would put in if you didn't have EDR, you tend to discount, right? And you're looking for more, I would say, customizable behavioral things, like
Right.
Somebody from the finance team logging in from Thailand, right? Okay, we don't do business in Thailand, so that's a huge red flag. Things like that, right?
Yep. I don't use them myself. I'm not in threat detection, so those were the kill chain I knew of, and I knew that the OODA loop or the kill chain is something that it looked like y'all had talked a little bit about it at the beginning of the book, and then it was like, well, it's not really a loop. It just kind of bounces back and forth between things from time to time, and I'm sure it works in some cases, but I found the Pyramid of Pain interesting, and I'll go ahead and check that out. The fact that it's a SANS conceptual model was something that I found interesting as well. So I posted links to that as on the page. So you mentioned detection engineering teams and teams, like it's a group of people. Do a lot of companies have the luxury of having a detection engineering team, or do they hire somebody like, I don't know, say somebody who has a blue hedgehog to do a lot of this stuff for them, outsourcing it? Or maybe they're the incident response people who are also the threat detection team. Do a lot of teams end up playing double duty there, where it's like, oh, I found this thing, now I'm the incident response person? How does that work? I mean, for us who work in large organizations like IBM, what does that look like for a smaller medium business that maybe doesn't have a dedicated detection engineering team?
Yeah, so I think, like you said, not every org's gonna have a detection engineering team. Some people don't have IR people in house or even their own SOCs. So having a whole dedicated detection engineering team is not likely something you're gonna find in smaller, even really medium-sized business to have people dedicated to that. So I think there's two parts. When there are dedicated teams, there may be a couple purposes. It might be something like Amanda, Blue Mirror. They are creating it for a product. They have a product. They need to detect things so that the customers of their product get those alerts. So those are one place you'll find detection engineering teams. Large organizations might, because they've brought in the products. They've, got different, things they're working with, and they want to improve their status. That's kind of higher level. You're a more mature organization if you have people focused on detection engineering. Where these skills apply, though, why I think this book is relevant to even smaller orgs, is that the same concepts can be applied in like a SOC environment. Like as a SOC analyst, you're almost already doing it in the sense like you're SOC analyst, you get an alert or you see some suspicious behavior in network traffic from a shady IP address, and you block that IP or you detect on that IP. So you're identifying malicious behavior, you're implementing a defense that now prevents that. So detection engineering, it's the same thing. So as a SOC analyst, these skills apply. You see an attack, it evaded detection, now you're responding, and that's kind of where that like other teams like IR being involved, that's a big thing here. If they saw something that bypassed defenses, the organization should find a way to not let that attack happen again. Don't just leave the back door open and let people keep coming in. So the concepts as a whole apply to really anyone defending an organization. If you're investigating something or working on something and you realize there's a gap, then how do you detect that behavior that was missed? But you are correct in the sense of a dedicated detection engineering team. You're not going to walk into a lot of organizations that have that in-house. It's likely going to be a joint type of role. So like a SOC analyst who, that's one of the things they do is they write some signatures and add some detections to their tools. But dedicated teams definitely for large organizations or security products are the two big ones, I'd say.
Okay. So we're triple streaming this, and we're technically on our Discord chat channel for this. But Beta Wolf, good friend of mine, a regular streamer listener, asked the question: does this book favor any tool over another, or is it written as tool agnostic as possible? I think that's important to ask because you'll write a book or you'll get a book and it's like, oh yeah, all you have to do is buy Splunk. And it's like, well, you can't just buy Splunk, y'all. Yeah. There's some definite, entry pain here if you tried to do that. So, were you thinking to try to be as tool agnostic as possible when y'all were writing this?
So that was our attempt. So one of the big goals we had going in, and the reason it's titled Practical Threat Detection Engineering, is we really wanted a hands-on component. Unfortunately, we cannot write labs for every single SIM and login collector tool and detection tool out there. So we did have to settle on one, and we did choose an open source solution to be accessible. So the labs themselves are done on Elastic-Stack. That being said, the concepts we teach, we try to approach from a vendor agnostic thing. So in the content of the labs, yes, this is how you write the KQL query to find this behavior in an ELK stack. But the concepts of how you think about things. So like, let's say there's a lab on take this article about this threat and, create detections in the ELK stack. The thought process behind it is the same. Yes, the field may not be named this, or the operator used might be different in your platform, but the concept of taking a blog post, reading it, and understanding how you now identify attacker, that is vendor agnostic. And then it's kind of up to you. Do you know Splunk query language? Do you know how your tool writes detections? So labs, not vendor agnostic in the sense that we say this is how you do it specifically in an ELK stack. But conceptually, you should be able to apply everything you learned regardless of the environment.
Right. Some of the other stuff I learned, I was looking through there. VirtualBox is always a good thing to have because some of the labs, when they walk you through, is going to be setting up some Windows or Linux VMs, which is something we'll get to later with some of the logs and formatting of the logs. The other one was Docker, which I saw was something that was suggested as well, obviously for the quick turnover into being able to deploy the same instances over and over and over.
And honestly, like, I know some people are gonna be like, some people already told me, oh, I haven't followed the labs one for one, or I haven't a detection engineering lab. Like, you should be able to, obviously, besides this is how you set up the lab. If we do a lab of like, here's a blog post, we're gonna break it down and understand how we take a blog post on a threat and turn it into a detection. You should be able to also follow those labs in whatever environment you want. We just wanted to provide the quickest, free, easy way to spin up a small home lab for those people who didn't have that starting point. And Docker and VMs is the best way to do that, easy and consistently.
Right.
Is this
so? Go ahead.
From the
Mr.
standpoint of how do you set up your detections? Like what sources you're trying to get things from, and then give examples, or maybe a list of examples that you can try and detect signatures from. For example, here, a good idea would be to hook up to your gateway, right, your email gateway, and look for these three things, right?
Yeah, so it's kind of a mix. We touch on a lot of subjects. So we have, for example, so we kind of start, we do introduce the lab and a basic, how do you use this lab? But then we talk about like the detection engineering life cycle. What does it take to get from this is something we want to detect to not only it's in production now, but also now how do we monitor this and make sure that we're not leaving bad detections in place? We touch on detection sources. So an overview of like, what are the things you should be looking at? You have endpoint logs, you have network logs, you have application logs. So we talk about the types of stuff you could pull in. And then when we talk about developing detections, we look at a couple different approaches. So we talk about indicators of compromise. Like we said, those kind of more low fidelity, but it's something you can do. How can you do that? And then that's when we, after that, we go into like the behavioral detections. And that's more of what you're saying. And we do give examples of here's a blog post, or here's a virus total link, or here's some piece of information from the real world. Like I use ISC diary and like virus total and stuff that you can go to and now walk through. So we give practical examples, but then try and map that to an overarching approach that you can then take to whatever use case you have. But it's a combination of like discussing actual real world examples, but then like, here's other sources. You know, you could be talking to an IR team. How do you process that kind of information? Like another person in your org, things like that. So we have several different like angles we're coming at it from. And we tried to cover everything, obviously not super possible in a limited amount of pages to go into everything. But there's a lot of perspectives we take of how and why and from where detections can be created.
Right. So you said limited number of pages. Did they limit you to like less than 300 pages, or is that just you limited yourselves?
They said our goal was for 200 or so pages. So like the goal was to keep it around 250. And then we kind of started with the outline, and based on the outline, like we had estimated page counts per chapter, and then we aimed for near there. So it was guidance. I think if we had been like, oh yeah, we need an extra 50 pages, they would have said no, but they also weren't looking for a 2,000 page textbook. And also I don't necessarily want the time it would take. 250 pages alone was a lot of work. I wasn't asking for 2,000.
And I feel eventually like that would be repetitive.
Yeah, you start,
point, right?
Yeah, there is a point at which you can stop, but we definitely wanted to highlight the key topics and touch on them enough that we felt our readers would have an understanding of the subject. And then like, it's also like, cause we go into like leveraging threat intel for detection. And like, I could have made that chapter 4 times as long if I give you an entire primer on what threat intel is, but that's not my purpose. My purpose is you have intel. How do you use it in this use case? So we had to find that balance of like, where do you start like going down rabbit holes versus just saying like, if you want to know more about threat intelligence, this is not a book on threat intelligence. Go to one of these 10 resources.
Right.
Now,
Megan,
did you have a favorite part that you wrote?
I would say probably the threat intelligence chapter, because that was kind of like my chapter. Like, so a lot of the chapters were like joint effort. We were all collabing on it. And then there's a few chapters where it's like, okay, well, Megan's has a background in threat intel, so that's her chapter. Gary's very good at like metrics, so he's gonna do the performance management chapter. Jason's really good at building labs, so he's gonna do the whole lab setup on the chapter on that. So like for me, chapter 10 was probably my favorite because it was the one that like, this was mine. Like I wrote that. Like they obviously put eyes on it, but like this wasn't a joint effort for that specific chapter. I did like the what chapter was it? I think there was one on when we were like writing the labs, kind of like the developing detections. Basically, I just like found a blog post on a threat and started there, and it was kind of like fun to work through because it was like I was also almost doing the exercise itself by developing it. So there's some cool stuff where it's like, okay, take a use case and apply kind of the concepts we've been mentioning in previous chapters and show that our logic works. So I'd probably say those two, but yeah, threat intel was my baby. So I like that one.
I know. Mr. Boettcher, question?
Yeah, Megan, okay, so put the manager hat on, right?
Yep.
From a manager's perspective, let's say you don't have threat detection of much, consequence, but let's say you have the tool, you've got Splunk. Now, how do you get started? I mean, what's more important? For example, I got to get a really talented person, right, to customize this thing for my company. Otherwise, or do I hire some experts like an Amanda to come in and set this stuff up for me? I mean, what are my options? What's the best route to take here?
Yeah, so that's such a hard question to answer because it really is so organization specific. Like,
Mm-hmm.
because I mean, a small org, they either have one of two approaches. The approach is either going to be we don't have the people in house, we have to outsource it, or we're not going to outsource it because we don't have the money, we got to keep it in house, or we're just not going to do any of it. But either let's say it's outsourced or in house.
Have you seen any like big successes either way?
I think if you want to be, I don't have any specific use case I'd say, or like specific scenario to recall. I'd say if I was approaching it or discussing it with a manager who is deciding, I really think that like it partially depends on what they want out of the program, I think is the big thing. Like, are they just trying to get some quick wins? Like, we know we have gaps, let me fill those gaps. Then you could be working with a SOC analyst and some engineers in your org who are technically savvy and like, hey, we need to detect this. If you're talking about you want a thorough detection engineering program, you want to assess your gaps, build detection, do coverage, you want that feedback cycle, then it's going to come down to, I think if you're really serious about it, but you're a small org without the talent, it would likely be wiser to go with outsourcing, just because I think it's easy to be like, oh, well, this guy's kind of sharp and he can work on the detections. But like when you see this book, it's not just, oh, you take a threat and you write a detection. It's like, okay, but are you monitoring that detection? What happens when it gets false positives? What happens when it breaks or isn't running or somebody didn't check the code?
Care and feeding.
Yeah. And you need accountability. Again, you can have one guy pushing detections, but who's the person saying like, okay, yeah, that works as expected. Like we talk about having those peer checks. So if you're looking to do it properly, and you cannot afford to staff an entire team and bring in people who are focused on it, then outsourcing is going to be your approach. You kind of like can't half-ass it if you really want the results that you expect from a detection engineering program. If you're just looking to use the concept of detection engineering and the concepts in this book to improve your security posture, at like a lowest hanging fruit type level, or just like as we're able to, this is useful stuff that we can get some quick wins, then sure, your SOC analysts, your IR people, they can do it as part of their processes. From the concept of a full program, I'd say unless you're willing to hire multiple people dedicated full time to it, then outsourcing is going to be your best option.
Does it really take multiple people though? Can you just hire one person that's
Amanda's
good?
agreeing with me.
I mean, why?
Multiple.
Why can't you hire somebody who has maybe half of your caliber? That's really good. And then, buy a tool that'll handle that and they're on it full time, one person.
The quantity is going to take forever. I talked to, just this week, I talked to the CISO office at IBM, their detection engineering team, and they were talking to us about we're on another team about our processes, because they're like, we've got like 8 detection engineers writing signature and our backlog never gets smaller. They're like, there's just tickets sitting, piling up, because I can all day tell you something you don't detect. And that gets very big, very quick if you start looking for it. Like, yeah, if you don't have a detection engineering program, you're not doing this discovery. The obliviousness is like, oh yeah, well, somebody just needs to occasionally write some signatures if something's missed. But if you are actively saying, what gaps do we have? You'll quickly realize it's not a one-man number of gaps. And then also going back to that require for like peer review of like, again, like when you're developing a software and you're pushing
Yeah.
code to production, you're getting another developer to look at that code. You're not just trusting the one developer like, oh yeah, he's smart. No, people make mistakes. But what happens when you push a detection that instead of detecting everything except like or detecting just a specific behavior, they had, you know, an equal sign wrong, and now they're detecting everything except that behavior, and now all your customers or all your employees are getting alerts because there's a bad signature push. There's just so much risk with detection engineering too. Like, it doesn't seem like it, but a bad detection can give an IR person a 2 a.m. call that like the company's burning down. And they're not going to be happy to find out it's because was one dude who was assigned to push detections and he's been pushing bad code. So a combination of the amount of detections that's needed if you're truly looking to perform like that coverage analysis, and the criticality of the pushing detections to prod requiring kind of that team effort.
And I think that's sometimes not even including testing those.
Yep.
Right. You might be testing against data that you've had, like say you had a breach or say you had a pen test and you're testing against that data. I was so surprised to hear how many companies don't have a lab to like test a tool or test to make sure whatever they're trying to detect actually detects that plus any iteration of that. There's like 100 iterations on how to dump passwords. Like,
yeah,
you can't just say, yeah, we can detect password hashing or password dumping.
Yeah,
or
and going back to like kind of team size and should you outsource or insource, those are the like adjacent things you have to think of. So like, okay, yeah, we can hire a couple detection engineering people or move a couple people. Wait, who's gonna build their lab for them? And when that lab needs maintenance, do you now have architects or engineers who are willing to dedicate the time to it? Do you have the resources to build that lab? You know, do you have all those processes in place that are adjacent to detection engineering but important for the success? And so that's like another reason for like potentially swaying the way of outsourcing if you're small, is bringing in a company who does that. They have those labs. So it's more than just like, you have, like you said, is more than just a guy who you guys have an AV or an EDR in your environment and a guy who kind of knows the tool. Like, that doesn't help him with all the other stuff required to properly.
And even like people talk about, well, can't you just like import all Sigma rules? No, you can't. You can't do that.
Good
any level of non,
yeah,
just an avalanche of detection alerts, right? Like, I mean, we have 4 people full time doing, and we still have a backlog of like 800 things.
Yep.
Like, I couldn't see even like, I'm sure like Google, Amazon, Microsoft, like they have full teams doing this, right? But like, even when I wasn't at Blumira, when I was doing like Splunk stuff, we had like Fortune 100 companies that still outsourced it. Like they had full CISO, like full teams of security, and still we're like, no, we're not doing the SIM.
I will say, like, one of the things we kind of talk about in the last chapter of this book of like the future of it, kind of more like, we talk a lot about how the field's evolving, it's getting big, there's more conversations. I think we're like the first book specifically on detection engineering. Like, we're doing a competitor analysis and it was like a couple chapters in some books, but it's getting bigger. The conversation's getting bigger. We're seeing more blog posts. I've seen a lot recently about setting up like the CI/CD pipelines and more like workflows and nitty gritty. And so I think we are going to see, though, a gradual progression towards that in-housing. Just like if you think of something like red teaming, like when red teaming, it's hot now, a lot of organizations, even mid-size, consider starting up red teams or purple teams because it's considered a good way to like proactively test your environment. I imagine over time we will see this kind of move. I think it will partially also come down to having the skilled employees. Again, it's a new field. So like we don't kind of like how cloud right now, cloud security skills are in high demand because cloud is newer. So people don't have certifications from 10 years ago or didn't learn in college. So having
Right.
more skilled people and then also having the tools. We see a lot of blog posts on like, hey, this is how we're doing our pipeline. Here's some open source tools. But it's like when you start getting products that allow you to help. So when we have the products that you can have someone with a SOC analyst background in your org start to work with things because he's got a detection engineering lab sold by some vendor or some test environment. Like we're seeing more breach and attack simulation, like purple teaming tools come out. So as we either get these skills or the tools, there's less of a barrier of entry to bring things in house. But right now, with it being so new, you either have to bring in new people, you have to build a lot of stuff like infrastructure manually. So I think we'll see a trend towards like it being more common for people with those skill sets or roles in organizations focused on that. But yeah, definitely right now, it's hard to justify an entire team dedicated to that because it's not as widely understood or known area.
Cool. Yeah. So one of our regular stream listeners, Super Lolly, thank you. It's early Monday morning for him, so he's in the Asia Pacific region. So thank you for being on with us, Super Lolly. Had a question. He said, one that I'll get from my CEO is, how is this any different than the current cybersecurity practices we have in place? Isn't it the same in terms of detections where, you know, we have an EDR, we have an XDR, we have all the DRs, we have the DSs, IDS, PDS, all these things. How is this any different than, and I'm assuming that's what you're going for, Super Lolly. Please let me know if I'm incorrect here, but you already have all this detection and reaction and preventative measures. And it's like, why do we need threat intelligence? Why do we need threat detections?
I would say for me, it's kind of looking at the process. So somebody told me that, I'd say like, okay, how do you guys prioritize which detections you're going to work? Once you've chosen which detection you're going to work how are you going to test it? What's your testing process like? How do you review it? Where do you store your detections? How does a detection get from conceptual to in production? Things like that. And on the vendor side, they're dealing with the same issue. And product visibility is get dependent. You need an EDR and an NGFW and a this and a that. Like you start acquiring all these products, but they're also facing the same challenges of writing these detections. So you can't expect them to detect everything. And they don't. And that's what you'll probably see. Incidents happen. If this would not be a conversation, we would not need detection engineers if incidents weren't happening. So my question to you is, so are incidents not happening in your investigation? Everything's being blocked by EDRs? If not, then either you have probably unstructured processes, you have people who it's not their focus. They're focused on, let's just like get this detection in place, close this incident and continue working. So I think it's a lot more about the structure and how you use it to improve like the overall security of your org and moving more proactively instead of just reactively. But I'm guessing anyone is like, oh, but we've got security analysts and these products doesn't have kind of like the workflows that would get you from a gap to closing that gap.
Okay. All right. That's fair.
Have you seen any enterprise products, tested them out, and kind of judged how good they actually are, right? Because are there some pretenders out there? I know there's some with, let's see, Palo Alto, Sumo Logic. I'm sure Splunk has a module too. I haven't used Splunk in a while, but are they any good? Or are they surprisingly good? Right? Yeah.
Let's be a little careful here. I love y'all. Before we start sacred cow tipping, let's not sacred cow tip or what have you.
I think all tools have their strengths and weaknesses. I think there's like a lot of
tools.
marketing. Most tools have a lot of strengths and weaknesses. Most tools have a marketing approach that, might indicate strengths in some areas that aren't necessarily strong. I think, but like I said, it kind of goes back to that things that those EDR companies, those companies that you're talking about, the products they offer, those they still have a detection engineering team working in the background, like doing this, and they're still also fighting the same battle. Again, incidents are happening. There's no company that's like, oh, well, I have, all companies using Palo Alto or using Carbon Black or using this have no incidents. If that was the case, there'd be a company that everyone went with because it would defend against all the things. So the point is, like, no product is the magic solution. If it did have, we would be having this discussion. There's still a gap to fill. So I think tools have their places. Having an EDR is better than not having an EDR, but thinking your EDR is going to prevent you from any incident that's impactful to your organization, regardless of which EDR or firewall or whatever that is ignorant to just be like, oh yeah, we got a security solution in place. Like, so I think,
a Carbon Black isn't going to help you when somebody's email
exactly
gets popped, right?
Yeah, and you might add on an email product, you might add on another product, but like, again, those products are just, they're going to get you part way. No, there's no golden key of like, buy this product and you'll never face an incident. So doing detection engineering is just another, patch. Like, we got, this covered by EDR, this covered by Mimecast, but this isn't covered. So now we're going to need to go in and fill that gap ourselves.
Right
now,
on.
Speaking of those gaps, though, I was searching for a capability matrix for, say, cyber defense, and I couldn't find one that was really straightforward, easy to use. I found one that took NIST and kind of flipped it around, and it's just so complex. Though they wrote like a 200-page book about it. I'm like, give me something simple.
Yeah, because like MITRE has this product that's complementary to ATT&CK called Defend, which is kind of like, here's like, for a given tactic, here's like the artifacts and the sources and things. Like MITRE and their ATT&CK has defense recommendations, but like I've actually found that same challenge. I started working on a new team, and we're kind of going to that point of, okay, so we haven't had a detection engineering capability before, so where do we start to determine where our gaps are? And like, that sounded like such an easy question. And then I sat down with a product. It had some capabilities in place, some it didn't. I got to figure out which is which. And I'm just like, but how? So like that.
Were you able to use Defend much? Like, I think we had a whole podcast episode on it.
I mentioned in the book, but I haven't operationalized it. And even in the book, we give mention of it, but I haven't seen really any operationalization kind of it. So for me, I think like really the only approach is, there's no good, like, this is like what you should detect. I think a lot of it, again, it gets organization specific. And that's why, like, the first thing I said of like, oh, well, how do you know my organization? Like, why can't we just use what we have? I'm like, what's the prioritization? Like, not every organization needs to defend against the same things. I'm not going to start by, I'm working for a US tech company. I'm not going to start with Googling how to defend against, a APT that targets European defense companies. So there's not an easy, like, these are the detections that you need to put in place, because it is going to be very variable, even to things like, and again, this is why you can't just turn on Sigma. Like, my organization, we might say if TeamViewer starts being deployed, that's super shady, and they're probably trying like remote access, like creating persistence there. But lots of organizations use TeamViewer legitimately, so I'm not gonna be able to mass distribute a TeamViewer. You must block it now. So kind of like, honestly, what my approach has been, I've been kind of looking through things like Atomic Red Team, and Sigma 2, from the perspective is looking at what are these things trying to detect, or what are these attacks trying to do, and how relevant is it? How likely is it? Those kinds of things is my approach, is like looking at what's out there in terms of attacks and detections, and understanding what's relevant to me and how I can, adjust that. But That's definitely one of the hardest questions, is the like, where do I start? Like, what do I follow? What do I implement? And it's so hard to do because it's so variable. And like you said, there is no framework. I mean, there are, but there's none that I've not really seen operationalized well.
So
But yeah.
I follow a lot of threat intelligence threads on my Feedly, and Unit 42, you get CrowdStrike, you get the Carbon Blacks and all those. What you're asking teams to do who may not have dedicated detection engineering teams is to create threat intelligence that they're going to use internally. When other teams have much faster, release times, or, it's obvious that their blog post for, the latest malware or ransomware is already out. Why do I need to create new detections or new, why do I have to do detection engineering if I can just wait for Unit 42 to come out with all the IOCs and, the TDPs that I need to worry about, and then I can just add those myself?
Well, I mean, that kind of is detection engineering in a sense for you. So I talk in the book about, we go over this concept of detection requirement sources. So where are you determining what should be detected? And so one of those sources is those blog posts. Wait for those blog posts. And then you say, okay, Unit 42 said these TTPs, this is what I can see in the logs. We'll write a detection based off of it. But the point is, them publishing that blog post does not now make you immune. You've not got to take that and operationalize it into a defense-free environment. Okay. But there's other detection requirement sources of, for example, working with your IR team. IR team saw this thing happen, so it clearly wasn't blocked. So now let's be proactive and make sure it doesn't happen again, closing that back door, patching that gap. But and so that's a different requirement source. And that's something that potentially Unit 42 isn't going to write about. What if that was a targeted attack against you rather than a widespread campaign? That's something you're only going to get from looking at your data. So it's different sources and different purposes, but it's all the same. They're all what we call the detection in the book, detection requirement sources. It may be an intel team. It may be you on a blog post or in your Feedly. It might be the IR people. It could be the red team. They ran a penetration test, and now from like a purple teaming view, they've said like, hey, these are the things that weren't detected. So I'd say both are valid. It's almost two situations. Seeing something internally versus externally does not mean that like one is more applicable than the other, or one should be doesn't work.
Right. Super Lolly's asking, I'd say risk-based threat detection will be the way to go, correct? Just detect things that are risky to you or your business?
Yeah, so that's kind of like, we talk about that a lot in the book, the prioritization phase of these detection requirements, especially when, like Amanda said and I said, is like a lot of these teams have huge backlogs. So an important part is determining what is of value to you. And that's going to be different especially if you're working for like an internal team versus a product team. Like obviously writing a product that you have to push detections for, you could be talking about hundreds or thousands of clients. Some are, in the defense industry, and some are in retail, and some are in Europe, and some are in South America. And that is a much broader, harder challenge because it's so broad. But if I'm working for my organization, I can quickly have like a quick triage of like, okay, well, this requirement is focused on Mac devices, and we only have a couple people in the organization using Mac. Let's focus on the Windows ones. Well, this blog post that somebody sent to us to detect about is usually is by a threat actor that typically targets Europe. We're in the US. Let's deprioritize that a bit. So from that sense, yeah, it's risk-based. Not only do you have kind of like the targeting and the applicability, you also have to think about likelihood and the ease of doing it. Is this something anyone can do, and like, or it's an exploit that just got announced, a really bad one, and there's POCs all over GitHub, and everyone's going to be attacking it? Or is this like a really advanced technique that's only going to be able to be done by a few threat actors, and like it's very unlikely? Or this is going to target a low risk asset versus this is going to go after our critical records? So definitely agree with the fact that like it's basically got to be risk based. Is you've got to determine what you're going to detect on based on what is most likely to have an impact to your organization.
Right. Okay. I think this also brings up larger questions of if you're creating your own threat detections. We've talked about ISACs all the time and information sharing, and you might be in a specific or a niche industry, or you might be in finance and you might see something that other teams don't see. Not only are you creating something that I would say competitors, but people in a similar industry would get hit with. But at some point you may want to do the Unit 42 thing and go, hey, our bank or our business has seen these kinds of issues, and share this information so that others can be protected as well. Like you said, Unit 42 might look for specific things that they may not have access to all of the financial systems that are available out there. So I can definitely see a need to have something done yourself. I actually want to talk a little bit about that process, because I read through that at the beginning of the system here. You mentioned the qualities of good detection, and I actually took a screenshot, and it's on page 2 of our show notes, which unfortunately I won't share with the listeners or the streamers, because you can buy the book. I believe there's a free chapter out as well if you wanted to go and check those out. But so the definition of good detection is the ability to detect the adversary, the cost of that ability to the cybersecurity organization, and the cost to the adversary that evades that detection. So I was reading this, and it was a couple hours ago, but I was reading this and I was like, okay, so you need the ability to detect the adversary, but it's going to cost you something. And then the adversary is going to have to overcome that cost. So at some point, your cost matrix is going to come up to this point where you're going to be able to detect everything, but it's going to cost you $12 million.
Exactly.
Or you can spend $5 and catch like 2 things, that kind of thing. The inverse is true, and the adversary, it's probably in terms of time or number of people or something like that, instead of raw money. But it could also be resources for the company as well. You only have so many people can look at so many logs or aggregate so many things. So eventually the cost benefit matrix will go all the way up to 100% detections for everything, but it's going to cost you small
Infinity.
GDPR infinity. Is there a happy medium? I mean, I don't want to say you kind of left it hanging, or y'all kind of left it. I don't know who wrote this chapter, but is there a good happy medium where it's like, what? I guess this goes to the metrics portions, where it's like, we're going to detect 50% of everything that's going on. Obviously, 50% is 50% bad. You want to detect 100%, but as cheaply as possible, right?
Yep.
So I don't know what is
one of the other costs there kind of is like, which we talk about in kind of the metric section, and MITRE has this concept of precision and recall, but it's basically like when you're talking about that 50% is good and 50% is bad, you can't really think about that, because if you have good and bad, there's a circle in the middle almost, and you can make that circle really small, which means I only detect a very small subset of activity, which means I'm going to catch less false positives. Or you can make that thing big, which means you're going to catch a lot of the bad stuff, but you're also going to catch a lot of false positives. So you're always doing this trade-off. And so there has to be a happy medium. But it's also, again, kind of like your organization based. Do you have the people that you can put a broader detection, or you can invest more in a detection and then risk false positives, risk, something not working well, and be able to respond to that? Or for you, do you want the things that are caught to for sure be caught? And then the other thing, kind of the cost to the adversary, we actually kind of look, it is time and resources. And this is where we come back to the pyramid of pain concept. So I can write a detection in 30 seconds for detect if you see this hash, but the attacker in 3 seconds can change their file to then evade that detection. So we're saying then you could invest more time and say, okay, well, I want to, detect more, of a process-based thing, but that's going to take more of your analyst time. That's going to take, but then it takes more for the adversary to evade that detection. So there's not really a happy medium in the sense like this is the number you should aim for, because it's kind of just like risk acceptance, the concept of risk acceptance to an org. Orgs know that they cannot defend 100% of threats. They could put a firewall that blocks anything and everything and cuts everything off from the outside world, but then they won't have a functioning business. So they decide, okay, well, what are we allowing to risk in order to operate more smoothly as a business? It's the same with detections. What are you willing to put in, or what are you willing to sacrifice in terms of resources or false positives in exchange for the ability to detect it? So there's no happy medium. The happy medium is what your organization feels is their risk acceptance. What are they willing to invest?
Right.
But yeah, in terms of good detection, the cost is more of like, it's a bad detection if the adversary is easily able to evade, like a hash-based detection. They can easily evade that, so the cost to the adversary isn't low. I could write a really adept detection that then also impacts business because it took out some production stuff too. And that the cost to the organization was high, even though the cost to the threat actor was also high to changes. So a lot of risk acceptance type stuff, I'd say.
So on those lines, providing value, right? And metrics. So how do you provide your CEO metrics on how well your detection program is doing and what kind of value it's giving the company?
Yeah, so the performance metric stuff, I'm actually going to share, and I'll put it in our chat, Brian, and you can share it on. My co-author Gary just released a 5-part series on measuring basically detection engineering focused metrics. So there's a lot of metrics he talks about. And so it goes from like detection coverage. So how much are you detecting? Detection drift. So are your detections over time losing value, or detection volatility and detection drift kind of hit that. He goes into the building blocks of metrics. So what all are you looking for? And for that, we talk about one of the most common things is false negative, true positive, false positive, true negatives. We talk a lot about those. And so we can talk about accuracy and like precision and recall. Those are things I mentioned. So not just how many times is this detection firing, or how many false positives, but getting more into like, okay, what percentage, of false positives relative to the true positives, relative to false negatives, all that kind of thing. So I don't think there's like one metric. When you're talking to the CEO, though, it's going to be a focus on kind of that's what they want to know. What are we stopping? That's going to be like the executive level, what's most important to them, the impacts that you're having on the company's defenses, which is hard to quantify. That's why Gary published this 5-part series, which is essentially straight out of chapter 11 of the book, is like, how can you communicate to a CEO that what you're doing is providing value? And a lot of that is going to also depend on your ability to collect that data, making sure you have the processes in place. And that goes back to that whole thing at the beginning of just like, oh, well, we got some people who can do detection engineering. We got the skills, it can be that one guy, but like, you can express the value without also building the program that allows you to collect that data. But a lot of it, probably most valuable, is going to be the kind of false positive, true positive rate. But it's important to look into things like over time, how's it performing? Is it being hit at all? Because it's cool to say, oh yeah, it's got a 0% false positive rate. Well, yeah, if the rule's never triggered ever, then did you put too much focus in a niche detection? So I'd say anyone who's super interested in that is chapter 11 of the book to a T, goes in depth into how can we calculate effectiveness and efficiency. So how do we know that it's working, and how do we know that not just that it's working, but it's working effectively? Do we need to refocus our priorities? Is there places that we're falling short of? And are we using our resources like in the best way possible?
How do
Very
you
nice.
document true positives? Because that's providing value right there. You found something and it was real.
Yeah.
Okay. I need to document that, because that's why you're there, right?
Yeah. I think like my ideal world, I'm building a program from scratch. I have the things in place. Ideally, a lot of the tools that analysts are using. So I'm writing a detection and they're opening up, whether it's a SIM or the EDR tool directory, they're firing off alerts. And almost all of these tools, you can close that alert and you're typically closing it with a status. So investigated, worked it, cool, or false positives. And I'm kind of focused. It's easier, I feel like, to track false positives. And so like, then I'm just subtracting that from the total number of alerts. So we had 5 cases or alerts generated for Detecion-X, and I saw 2 of them closed out as false positive. I know 3 were true positive. So unfortunately, it relies a lot on the processes. Like, again, you have to proactively determine how you're going to track this, because otherwise the CEO is going to say, okay, well, how many of your detections are working? I don't know.
They all
So
are.
it's a lot about telemetry, looking at how are your because as a detection engineer, you're not the one saying whether it's true positive or not. You're pushing into production, then someone's responding to it if it triggers. So it's important to establish with those endpoint, with those, those people on the front lines, how are you going to? If they say, oh, well, we close tickets in our ticket management system as false positives, now you've got that point you can work on. Or, oh yeah, we have a document where we track this, or, you can pull these logs from this system and it has the data for you. So it's a lot of like cross collaboration, since you aren't the one who's going to identify it as true positive or false positive. You need to get that data from the teams that are leveraging it. If you're a product team, again, if you're working on a detection-based product, make sure that's something you're working into the product. Can you, for your 100 clients, get telemetry on how they're interacting with alerts, that they're marking alerts as false positives? So on my new team, that's one thing I'm saying, okay, well, it's great if we push these, but we need a way that when someone, a customer, 10 different customers immediately closed everything related to this one specific signature as false positive repeatedly, then there's probably something wrong with that signature.
Yeah, the one thing that I think we struggle with is in that same, you have to give them the ability to close them as a certain type or whatever, when they all have a different idea of what a false positive is.
True.
And you can only rely on those things so much. So you rely on the false positive as being that detection did something that they didn't want it to do. Like whether it was a true false positive or not.
Yeah.
It
could be
did
alert
something
fatigue.
in the end that person responding to it thought it was a false positive, whether they
or
knew.
They already investigated it via different case. So.
Right. So it's really hard when you have a lot of different companies that have a different idea of what a false positive is. And one of our options is like risk accepted.
Yeah.
Which
Yep.
is way higher than it should be. I'm just saying that.
Right.
Yeah. So I think that's like on the list of many challenges that I don't think we fully again, this is kind of a newer concept and industry field, detection engineering. So like those are the things we didn't think of. We thought of like, oh yeah, well, we create rules and there's this definition of true positive, false positive, but like then there's that gap of like, okay, well, how do you determine that? And I don't think there's a specific solution yet. It's more procedural, and it's what your organization define, like how you choose to define those metrics and how you choose to observe. Again, you could go through a ticketing system and build search queries, but that's based on people doing things with the ticketing system and your assumptions of how they use it.
Yeah. So Super
So
Lolly
you
asked the
have-
question. He said, in that sense, false negatives will be much more dangerous. How do you detect that? Is there some sort of critical thinking where it's like, okay, I've created this rule. What could be, what could get around it? Is there some kind of, is that how you think about it? Or how would you,
So
I've dealt with false negatives
that's
forever.
really tough
So
because a false negative, you would have to kind of backtrack, right? You'd have to have an incident and then say,
Exactly.
well, why didn't I detect it? And then you'd
Yep.
have to backtrack, like, should I have had a detection? And if I did, why didn't it fire?
yeah, that's
Right.
exactly what I was gonna say. The nature of a false negative is that you don't really know until it's happened. And you can reduce your chances of false negatives. Like how you said, how you can like proactively think. That's kind of like what you do is proactively, how can I make this the most robust detection possible while also attempting to reduce false positive rates? And that also goes back to pyramid of pain, is like, I can think about of like, okay, here's a hash I could block. Yes, that's true. I'll detect it. Now let's think about like, okay, well, how could the adversary get around that? They could change a character and now it does it. Okay, well, then let's look at the process tree. Now I look at this process tree. Okay, I can detect it this way. How could they evade that? So you can take a proactive, like thinky approach, and you can build more robust detections in the sense, again, that cost to the adversary is high, that you're choosing methods that are harder to evade. But yes, the nature of a false negative is you don't know a false negative until it happens. And that's something you can track. Like I'm going to have, like when we go back to detection requirements, like right now I'm working on the ticketing system for our detection development in my new position. And it's like, well, you'll have new detections. There'll be a ticket you can create to do a new detection, but there'll be a modification. And the modification is because something didn't behave as expected. And that could be that somebody reported, hey, this wasn't detected. And it wasn't not detected because we didn't have a detection, but it was not detected because our detection we intended failed. So like, I had, a detection for this privilege escalation technique, but I didn't know until we were reported that it wasn't detected that there's another command line argument that could be used. And we only look for this one type of command line argument in our detection. And so then you could start tracking it of like our false negative rate based on changes we've had to make. But again, it's reactive more than proactive. So false negatives, unfortunately, there's no good way to catch them. If you're catching them, then it's because it was missed, and that is never good.
So you have categories, Amanda, like true positive, false positive, accept risk, and I don't give a crap.
Basically.
I got too much work to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like what is it? Valid, false positive, risk accepted.
I accept.
I feel like we have another one. We have 2 or 3 more.
Yeah, there's usually like every tool I've used like that. There's always like 4 or 5 options. Like
yeah, because there's so many use cases when you're even if you're giving them a walkthrough of like initial response actions, like there's still so much you can do, and just like you can't cover every possible base unless there's
Right.
like a fill-in option here.
So the idea is not to have a bunch of low quality, detect the hash kind of detections. It's always to improve them, to get them better, to get them closer to that top of that pyramid.
yeah, because one, the noisiness, you're reducing the false positives, and then 2, the longevity of it. Again, if the attacker can change it easy, it's not going to last one. A technique-based approach, and again, if you're doing a specific threat actor, well, this threat actor, they always use a file by this same name. Okay, but if the file achieves the tactic of collecting passwords from system memory, why not, instead of detecting that specific tool, detect the behavior of collecting credentials from memory? And now I've covered 20 different attacker tools that can do that and 30 different threat actors that perform that action. So, and those ones will last longer. Whereas if I do a hash based or I do a tool based, as soon as that hash or tool changes, it's dead. And my work effectively was wasted, like on that detection, when I could have instead put a little bit of extra time into creating a detection that now lasts for like 2-3 years until this overarching technique dies.
Okay. This may have been asked and answered, so forgive me, but so we've talked about pairing with incident response folks, as part of the threat detection. The incident response folks are going to have their thing, and it's going to be, identify, the whole pickerel thing. I should remember this because I've got a coin over there saying that I took the class and done all that. But part of it is, just getting the company safe, containment, eradication, getting back up to snuff. The detection team is probably going to be helping with that in some way to help, with containment or with detections.
I would say not, like, in my opinion is it will less be in the moment and more like that the IR team becomes a detection requirement source. Like, there's nothing I can, again, as a detection engineer, I'm trying to do a proactive approach. So in a reactive situation, my value is, I will say the different case being, it is an ongoing attack. We need a detection in place now before it spreads to other hosts or to catch it moving laterally. If that's a concern, then I might get in the mix. But in general, for me, my IR team is a source of knowledge. They're on the front lines. They're seeing the attacks. They know what is and is not detecting. They know when our detection failed. They know when we didn't have a detection, and they report that back. But then, like, unless there's an immediate need of, like, before this spreads to the next machine, let's catch it now, push in the next hour, then for me, that's a ticket in my queue of, hey, there's a new requirement for a detection. It's because IR saw this, this, and this. And luckily, since they're on the front lines, they can provide the logs, the evidence file, the information. But they're essentially another Unit 42 blog post to me. They have the data, the information, and I can use that to build a detection. But like, I'm not part of that reactive response.
Okay. So we've mostly been talking, well, mostly, like the EDRs, the NDRs, the XDRs, the server logs, network logs. What about application security stuff? How much of threat detection is going to be, hey, I have a WordPress or I have a Jira that for some ungodly reason we've exposed to the internet because we have to, or what have you. That was really weird. How much some of the ideas in the book was, hey, you're going to set up agents on your systems as part of the lab, and here's how to set it up for Windows, and here's how do you set it up for your Unix and Linux and your Apache. But I've got a Heroku, I've got a cloud-based instance, I've got a SaaS platform or something, I got Salesforce logs. How much knowledge of those logs, or maybe you're not getting those logs because, well, I mean, I was going to say about you don't have an E5 account, but apparently Microsoft saw the light and has opened that up for logging. You did the dead. So let's say I've got a big Salesforce thing and I want you to create detections for that. It's like, you may or may not get those logs. What can people do for systems that they're going to be locked out of, or the team's like, yeah, we're not going to give you those logs?
I mean,
that's real. That's real.
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, it might sound kind of dickish, but it's the truth that, like, if the teams aren't going to work for you, they're like accepting the risk. Like, if I say, hey, there's like, the organization says, okay, there's a need to detect this type of exploit attempt against a publicly exposed Jira. That's great. As a detection engineer, I'm going to investigate the threat. I do all my research. I say, okay, the way this can be detected is via this application log off of the Jira server. We need it forwarded to our clusters, or we need it forwarded to the SIM or whatever. So then at that point, I don't run the Jira server. I don't do any of that. So I go to their team and I say, hey, I need this log file because I need to detect this stuff. They're going to say no, then not my problem. Like there's no way I can't magically make that data appear. So then it's the point of I have to go back to the requester and say, hey, in order to detect this, we need this log. That team says no. And at that point, it's, mom and dad get to figure it out. Like either the other team's going to be told, no, this is important to the org, get them the logs, or they're going to come back and say, never mind, we can't get you those logs. Sorry. And it, depending on the use case, there may be other rounds. Like maybe you can't do the Jira, application log based detection, but there's a firewall in front of that or a router that you can like look at some behaviors. So you can attempt other approaches, but if it's completely blocked by incooperative other teams, like that's their problem. And either the organization needs to force cooperation or they need to accept the risk.
Right. Yeah. Escalation is always an option if they won't give it to you. But yeah, I mean, I was thinking after I asked the question, because I'm an idiot, I was like, oh yeah, firewall logs, you've got, load balancers, you've got WAFs, you've got other opportunities that where you may be able to go and say, hey, I need, this, or I need that, or, Cloudflare might have logs or something like that.
You can look at the attack, like if it's a specific attack of like, oh, this threat actor is using Jira to pivot to XYZ, you could look at like those pivot movements, the follow-on activity. So there's like residual stuff. If it's like absolutely like there's no other way except this specific log and the organization controlling that log is not being cooperative, then at that point it's risk acceptance for the org. Like I can't make the data appear.
Full packet captures.
Yeah. Yeah. And that goes back to our point of a good detection balances the cost to the organization, because if you're asking for unrealistic things, then again, it's like, okay, well, maybe the risk is worth it. Maybe that's not a good detection. Maybe you need to find a different way.
Right. Is there any other questions we want to ask? I guess we should talk about the career items, because that was the last chapter, career guidance for detection engineers. Yeah. Obviously, having a lab at home, having access to, being able to test these things in your own home safely, including, sandboxing for the malwares and stuff like that, which you can find information at Malware Archaeology on how to set up a lab to be able to analyze malware for that respect. I've got people I've mentored, they're SOC analysts and they're like, oh, I want to get into malware detection. I want to analyze malware and I want to do all this stuff. And I want to, obviously get into threat intelligence and red teaming and stuff like that. And, could you give us, some, maybe the high level overview of what chapter 12 is like, do everything from chapter 1 to 11 and you should be good to go? Or, I mean, is there something else?
So that was kind of a challenge to write, because it all goes back to like, this is kind of a new field. Like even organizations don't really know what they're looking for when they're trying to hire a detection engineer in a lot of cases. Like there's a lot of questions, and it can be like a large number of people can move into it, but you've also got to have the right balance of skills, because it is like an engineering role in some sense. But like I've also seen organizations try to take like an engineer like for development, like, and put them in a DE role, but like they don't understand the threat. Like they can write the code, but they don't understand what they're writing code for in the same way. So I think it's some technical prowess at a basis helps, but it's definitely, the problem is right now is there's not a lot out there focused on it. Like I can go take a cert on cloud security or take a cert on red teaming. Like I know the CEH, I know I can get my Sec Plus to work in a SOC. There's not really a clear path for detection engineers is kind of what that chapter boils down to. I do recommend a lot of like there's so many good blogs out there from vendors providing like threat reports and things like that. Like we said, like MITRE ATT&CK is very well known as a name in the industry. So being able to effectively communicate with ATT&CK, whether you know, a lot of people would argue like, oh, it's just a framework, like it, you know, there's a lot of problems with it. It doesn't matter if the people hiring are like, oh yeah, if we throw MITRE ATT&CK all over our marketing materials, like you need to know that, or we support this via mapping. So MITRE ATT&CK has been heavy in DE. So I'd say like even just learning to navigate that website and communicate that information. And then yeah, Intel and that are probably the biggest like adjacent skill sets you could develop, and then being hands-on. A lot of it though is like, can you take an attack, a threat, something that was missed, and reason your way into how to detect it? So do you have the understanding of how an endpoint works, how a network works, to be able to go from a high level concept to how do I detect that? And that again is a wide range of skill sets. Like it could be malware analysis, understanding process relationships. It could be because you've had a SOC background, you've understood the SOC, so you responded to alerts and seen kind of what happens there. It could be experience with EDR tools. You've written detections in an EDR platform, so you have that. So I think there's no like clear path at this point, and maybe over time certs will come out, and you know, there will be more similar job roles and a clear understanding. Right now, the biggest thing, at least I was actually recently trying to hire a detection help. I was on interviews boards for hiring a detection engineer, and almost all the applicants didn't have a detection engineering position in their background, again because it's not a common one, but also like a lot of them were like SOC and IR and threat hunt. And so I wanted what we were trying to get them to do in interviews was be able to talk us from how they see something in the SOC or in an IR engagement or in an Intel report, and get that to how we detect it. So there's a lot of like more like logical reasoning skills too behind it, combined with an overarching understanding of tech. And Amanda, I know she's hired detection engineers, so maybe she can, speak
It's
more
so
to
hard.
what she looks for and what she's like seen has been strengths. So
So,
I haven't
yeah,
done much on
like the
hiring.
last few we've hired for my team have all been people that have been prior sysadmins, prior net admins, worked at MSPs in like SOC roles. That, I mean, you can't craft detections if you don't know how an operating system works. I mean, you can. It's not gonna be good. You need to know how attacks are actually carried out. Like, I'm sure anybody that would want to switch from a red team role would probably do fantastic in detection engineering.
There's just not many of them.
Yeah, there's just no one that wants to do that. So yeah. Yeah, it is a really hard role to hire for. I mean, I had people interview for it that had no idea what a SIM was, had no idea what a SOC was, and yeah, just hiring in general I hate. But
And then
So-
like the other
Not
thing I've
easy.
noticed is, especially organizations that kind of have like bucketed job titles, like IBM does. Like my job title is security engineer, but like
Yeah.
how security engineers, like in the traditional sense, are much different than detection engineers.
Yeah, I
So
mean, a
either
security
people
engineer
who want
should be-
detection, people who want to do detection engineering can't find the post because orgs are calling it a security engineer, or security engineers are applying thinking that's what it is, but it's like not really. You're not
Right.
architecting and engineering a secure infrastructure. Like
Right,
it's very
right.
different. So
Like,
there's
you're not
also kind of
implementing
that.
CrowdStrike.
Yeah.
You are.
Yeah. You are writing detection for within CrowdStrike based on security knowledge. So yeah, I'm glad Amanda agrees, because I was writing that chapter and I'm like, this is what you need, and I'm like, I don't know, like.
So
It-
that was going to be my next question after Super Lolly said that, you know, HR is going to put all that in and ask for a unicorn. I have started thinking about things. I have a friend of mine who works for a gaming company, and I was like, do you have security people? And he's like, they're not dedicated. We have people who are developers who have a security bent. And I was like, well, it's the best. That's the best you can do right now. And he's like, yeah, if I was going to hire a security person, they need to know this and this and this and this and this and this and some of that and a little bit of this over here. And I was like, holy shit, you want a unicorn? Because,
Yeah.
it's hard. It's hard. Yeah.
And that's why, like, I understand when people say security can be a junior level role, but a lot of the positions aren't.
SOC
Like-
analysts are
Like
junior
a
level
stock
roles,
analyst
like
can- it
risk
can
analysts,
be,
like
but
yeah,
like
tier 1.
it's hard to yeah, it's
Yeah.
you have to have so much background knowledge to be effective in certain types of roles. Like even like a security what was the position that you said earlier, like
Engineer.
Yeah, like security engineer. Like engineer, I think gets thrown around like crazy anyways, but
Yep.
if you think about like that level of position, that is not a beginning level position. You can't just be like, I got a security degree, 4 years later I'm going to go be a security engineer. Like maybe like if you also do a bunch of stuff on the side, but they're like I mean I've known people that have graduated with the 4-year degree and still have no idea like how IP addressing works. Like you have to know that stuff.
Are you making fun of me?
No,
I know.
right now?
I
Like, to
laughed
know-
not at those people, but I laughed at me reading a Net Plus tech book after 6 years of college because I didn't know how IP addressing
Yeah,
works. And
it's
then I got a
important.
career in security and was like,
It's
wait, I got no
important.
networking to do security?
Yes, it's important.
Look, I'm
don't
still
have
Googling
to.
cider notation, y'all. So you know it is. Yeah. Hey, Moon Pie Dumplings, I appreciate you coming. Everyone's interested in cybersecurity, and
Don't worry.
everyone's noobs here. So
Yeah.
yeah.
There's a lot of stuff that we don't know about. Like I couldn't tell you how to even start reverse engineering malware.
Yes.
Or like
Exactly.
Yes.
or
Exactly.
I can't write code for nothing.
Yeah.
Like I've written like
I
one
can.
Python thing ever.
I can write some
yeah.
Rust. I can
No.
write some Rust.
Everyone has a starting point. So just
Right.
as long as you want to continue learning.
I think
Right.
that's one thing we haven't done great. Like as an industry, people coming into the industry, I think immediately get overwhelmed, partially out of surprise of all the subspecialties.
Oh yeah.
Like
Oh,
in
yeah.
high schoolers, we're saying like get into cybersecurity, and then they get into cybersecurity, and they're like, "There's like 100 different subspecialties. Like, what am I supposed to do?" Like, we're not. I don't think we, as an industry, prepare the people coming into the industry for what a career in security means, which is that a career in security does not look like a single thing. Like you have
No,
options.
I mean, like you could be doing help desk or sysadmin
Yeah.
or developing, and they're
Yeah.
still security related.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I just figured out it was easier to manage those people and not try to do that stuff myself. I just manage the talent. That's all it is, you know. I try to remove any hurdles to get out of their way and to get their work done. So I find that's the easiest
Those
way for me
people
to
are
do stuff.
important.
So
Yeah.
Stay away
I'm
from
the
technical questions.
opposite. I have no desire to manage people, so I'm glad you're there to do it for us.
yeah, very cool. So I want I you know, is there any other questions? Moon Pie, I'm sorry you got here a little late. I do stream on Tuesdays and Fridays about security stuff, and Fridays I do Rust programming. I'm actually thinking, my last question I think is, if I take this book and I take the set up the lab function on a stream, will I be able to do it? Or am I going to have to reach out to Megan and go, hey, what does this mean? How do I do
like
this?
you should be able to. I will say VirtualBox and Docker or VirtualBox and Docker. So like you could be a pro and still things go wrong. Like anytime you use VMware, like I teach for SANS and in it like advanced like level course. And like half the lab is like, what's this weird error that VMware is giving me? And so like, I won't say you're not going to face any issues in terms of the ease, assuming no weird, janky VirtualBox complaints. It should be simple enough. It's very much just like creating VMs and spinning up a Docker host. Like
Right.
there's nothing complex.
Yeah. Yeah. Every stream I have where I do something is like, you know, you go and you're sitting in front of everybody at DEF CON with 1,000
Yeah.
people in the auditorium and you're doing the demo live.
Yep. And
And
you just don't. That's why
invariably,
I never tell
it's hot
anyone that it'll
garbage,
go
so.
perfectly smoothly. I'm like,
Yeah.
it could be the easiest task in the world and something will go wrong because it's a live demo.
Right.
Yep.
And I do that every Friday. So yeah, I'm pretty
So
much
every
inured
Friday
to
you
it.
can watch Brian Break live Googling different errors.
Or like last Friday, why the fuck does this work? I don't know what they mean here.
I had the worst. I was working on lab development for my SANS course, and I ingested the logs into Sawfelt, and there was 1,155. And then I ingested them again, and there's 1,156. And then I tried it again, and there's 1,154. And this went on for like 30 minutes of every time I re-ingested the logs, it was a different number, and I gave up. I was like, I'm done with this. I was like, I hate computers. I really don't know how I work in this industry. The computers are supposed to be logical. Someone lied to me about that because there is no logic.
Sounds like a parsing error or something like that. Some kind of weird stuff. Yeah.
I've been trying to
very
do
odd.
graphing lately, and it just wants me. It's terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah. So before we go, I do want to talk about hackers' health a little bit. Yeah. You know what? I have to fight my daughter for the blue shirt. I need another one of those. I need like an orange one or something. She took my blue one with the green stuff on it. And I have to fight her for this one because I'm like,
We
this
need
one's
another
mine.
one soon.
It's
Another
my
fundraiser.
freaking favorite. But so y'all are going to be doing a workshop at Blue Team Con at the end of the month.
Yep.
Yep.
I'm actually also D4 Summit in Austin with SANS next week.
okay.
I'll be running the room there for a couple
okay.
days. Blue Team Con. Do we have anything else coming up?
Yes.
I'm sure we do. Oh, besides KC in October, I'll be there, I think.
Mm-hmm. And
I don't know.
maybe no Wild West not Wild West Hacking Fest. Trying to think of all the other ones.
We have an army of volunteers now, so we
We
don't
do,
have
I
to
know,
be
it's
at
hard to
every
keep
single
track.
one. So like
Um,
sometimes somebody just asks for a village and it's there and they run it, and we
Which
love
is
our
great.
ambassadors.
So
Yeah.
great. Me and Megan not having to do all of them. I'm trying to get there's a huge MSP conference that ConnectWise runs that I'm trying to get us a spot at. That's more just like tech focused, not necessarily security related, but yeah.
It's okay. We'll check their credentials at the door. Only security people allowed.
Very
Definitely.
cool. Well, you know, I'm down here in San Diego, so you know, if y'all have a framework or something, you know, there's a big SANS conference that happens.
We do.
Besides
We'll do
San Diego's
stuff.
down here too. So.
Yeah, we have our volunteer ambassador village kits, which is a village in a box that gets shipped around the country. So we've
Yeah.
got 3 of
I
those.
don't remember.
I don't know.
remember.
We have 2
I
or
think-
3 villages
I
in a
think-
box floating around the US.
2 are at my house right now, I think.
Yeah. I think there's a 3rd one dispatched. And then me and Amanda each have our own full village, which is like
Which my
the
full
extra
village
big.
isn't even at my house right now. It's somewhere else.
Okay.
Dang.
I got mine.
Okay.
I have to go get it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So mentalhealthhackers.org. It's on all the Slack the channels right now, so you can go check that out. You can help out. You can make sure that you go to the conferences, or you know they take donations as well. You said new shirts were coming out.
I said we should. We need
Should.
to.
Oh, okay.
We haven't had a t-shirt. You can always buy shirts on TeePublic. If you search for us on TeePublic, we have a
Okay.
full-time store. But like typically, I think these ones are a little bit nicer, and we have like different designs. So
Yeah.
sometimes we do that fundraiser. We get a bit more from the fundraiser too, like percentage wise. So we'll have to
Yep.
find a reason to make a new one.
Yeah, my daughter took the blue one and the green one there that you have, and I'm like, look, I gotta have one. Okay,
Yeah.
so let me have one. I'm gonna
Yeah.
be wearing this one in Vegas. So
I gotta say, I do
Um,
love the sweatshirts. The sweatshirts are pretty great.
I don't need a
don't think
sweatshirt.
I
Live in
have
San
one.
Diego. It's 90
Fair,
degrees
yeah,
here. So
fair.
yeah.
To be
I don't need
fair,
a
I
hoodie.
said that I bought the long sleeve shirt, and I was like, I live in Texas. I don't need this, but it's so comfortable. And there's days where it's just chilly enough. Like 2 times a year, I get to wear it, so it's
Nice.
worth it.
When you come to Ohio,
Yeah, I
Yeah,
go to
exactly.
Ohio.
Exactly. Yeah. So anything else we want to discuss, talk about? Thanks everybody for coming out on the YouTube channel and the LinkedIn. We do this on Tuesdays and Fridays. Like I said, Tuesdays is more general security stuff, like some news and items that we discuss. Breakingsecurity.com, BRAKEING security.com. And we have a Discord, so discord.gg/breaksec. We also have a Slack, which has been going on for about 5 years. Megan is a moderator. Miss Berlin is a moderator. Mr. Boettcher is a moderator when he comes in. We do have a threat intel and a threat hunter channel. I understand now that there's a difference between the two. Because when I first made those channels, I was like, threat hunting and threat intel, same shit. They're like, no, it's completely different. I'm like,
There's literally, I think
is so much more fun.
Yeah, the first chapter of my book, there's a whole paragraph of like threat hunting versus threat intel versus DE. So you gotta be very clear. There is a difference.
No, I just call it thrunting now. It's just thrunting. So
I laughed when I saw that.
People are trying to make thrunting stick.
They were trying to make it happen.
No one wants it.
I want it just because, like, I shouldn't want it. Like, it's so bad.
Put it on my resume.
I just want a reason to say thrunting and
I'm a professional thrunter. So yeah, professional thrunter. Yeah.
I'm not telling any of my family that.
So Megan, how would people get a hold of you if they wanted to talk more about the book or,
I used to tell you Twitter, but we all know how that went. So probably, I don't know. Honestly, somehow since the book release, LinkedIn kind of became the spot to reach me at. I don't know why. I'm sorry.
Who would have thought?
I don't even want to say that. I really don't want to, but connect with me on LinkedIn, DM me there, and I'll actually respond to you. Yeah, you can try on Twitter, but I'm most responsive probably right now on LinkedIn.
Okay. Yeah. Very cool.
I'll be at Blue Team Con in Chicago in a few weeks. Come say hi in person if you're there.
You gonna be doing any book sightings?
I'm gonna bring a signed copy of the book to be a prize for one of Lynn Tile's game shows. So
very nice.
I know that much. We'll see. I might bring some extra copies, so come find me.
Okay.
I'll sign yours for sure. Anyone who brings me a copy, I'll sign it.
Well, you'll have to sign my Surface because it's an ebook. So...
with a Sharpie.
There you go. Oh yes, on the screen. On the screen to make sure that it
I'll
doesn't
sign
go
your
away.
tablet.
There you go.
Yep.
Got it.
Yeah. It's guaranteed to go up in value at least a couple of dollars or something. So cool. All right. Ms. Berlin, oh, wait, hold on. For those of you who have been listening to the show, today's episode of the Breaking Down Security Podcast is brought to you by Boettcher, which provides easy-to-use SIM and XDR that can be set up in minutes. Teams of all sizes can resolve security threats faster with detection rules written by BreakSec's own Amanda Berlin. You can find out more information at bluemirror.com/break. On to the show.
So great. That's the first time I've heard it.
I've said it on every stream. Obviously, you've missed the first 10 minutes of every stream that I go on. So yeah, obviously you've missed all of my streams.
Yes. So. I missed all of everyone's streams. It's not just you.
Anyway. I'm a sad panda.
I'm glad I can make this one.
So, Ms. Berlin, how would people find you if they wanted to talk about detection engineering, incident response, threats, that kind of thing?
Probably LinkedIn. Like, seriously,
LinkedIn.
I don't know.
I'm so glad you said that.
I don't know how LinkedIn has now become. How has LinkedIn become?
It's semi-professional.
This is what I ask myself every day.
It's semi-professional. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. That's it.
So glad you said it. I feel less cringe now.
Twitter, Blue Sky, Mastodon, X.
I'm on Threads.
Something. Yeah.
I'm on Threads. Yeah.
Sometimes I check those. Sometimes.
Yeah. Okay. Mr. Boettcher, how about you? You on LinkedIn as well?
Snapchat.
I am on LinkedIn, but sometimes,
Oh my God, who ate Brian?
That's the old
Seriously?
House. Did Brian buy your old house?
Yeah, you must have. Oh, I was facing the wall at that point. Okay, that's cool.
That's pretty great.
Yeah.
That's nice. Got jokes. That was before the paint job, so it still had the orange in it. So yeah.
Yeah.
Very nice. Okay. Cool. Well, I'm on LinkedIn as well. I'm on Mastodon, Brian Brake at mastodon.social. I need to move BrakeSex from Twitter to something, probably Mastodon, but I'll just add whatever it is there. Yeah. So yeah, we're on Twitch, we're on YouTube, we're on, all your favorite podcatchers. Just come find us. And thanks everyone for coming out tonight. Megan, don't hesitate to come back because, this was awesome.
We'll work it out. I had fun. I forgot how fun this is.
If you want to come back just to, do some detections, we could do some demos or something. You can show us how easy this is. So
sounds good.
Yeah. Cool. Right on. Right on. Well, that was it for Breaking Down Security this week and this Sunday. So everyone have a great week. Be kind to one another. Take care of yourselves. We lost Sinead O'Connor this week, who had some history with some mental illness. So if you're suffering or you feel like you need a hug or you need somebody to talk to, don't hesitate to reach out to folks. We've got people who love you, especially in the security realm. Do what you can to, make it through that day, make it through that hour, make it through that minute if you can. And, let somebody know if you're hurting, because if you leave us, we'll be left with questions and it hurts us too. So everyone have a great week, and we'll talk to y'all soon. Bye, everybody.
Bye.